everybody. Welcome back to Arise. Good to see you all again. I hope you are excited to continue to talk about consecration. I hope you've enjoyed the last couple of conversations on this subject, because it's not always an easy subject to talk about, and not everybody likes to talk about it. But it's an amazing thing to enter into when you see yourself as part of a warrior bride, and you see those fires that God wants to see burning inside of you, of purity, holiness, and intimacy. It's an invitation into something that is just so much more incredible and awe-inspiring than you've ever experienced before, and you never ever regret saying yes. Saying, yes, Lord, I just surrender everything, and I want to consecrate myself unto you and just step into everything you have for me. And so I'm really trusting that that's how you felt, and that that's what has come across to you in these videos, and that you're excited about what this means to you, as a person, as a believer, as a woman, as a man, as a child of God, that you're excited about a journey you can undertake with Jesus, which will lead you into just the space of just holiness and awe. And I'm excited. I'm excited about the journey, and I'm excited about all the feedback and the testimonies and the messages that I get from all of you. So I want to encourage you again, don't stop reaching out to me. Tell me your stories. Tell me, it's not only testimonies and awesome things that you get to share with me. Tell me your struggles. Tell me if there's something that you are struggling with specifically that you think that you need help with. Maybe it's something I can cover in one of these videos. Maybe there's something that you have experienced that you don't understand. Maybe there's something a problem or an issue that you're facing that you can't see your way out of. Reach out to me, let me know, because if I can deal with things like that on these videos, that's what I want to do. We're all real people. I want to deal with real people issues and the things that confront real people. So, we're talking about consecration, right? We're talking about the warrior bride. We're talking about the beautiful bridal gown with the AK-47 and the grenades and the weapons. The beautiful bride fully weaponized for war. If you've watched the previous videos, which I really hope you have, we spoke about the war trumpets that have been blown. We spoke about this call, this shaking that is happening around the earth, where God is just awakening his bride and trying to get her attention. And we spoke about the fact that not everything that happens is from God, but he uses everything that happens to speak to his people and to talk to them about drawing closer to him, about walking in intimacy, about walking in purity, about walking in holiness, about being consecrated or set apart unto him. So one of the things that has been kind of in the back of my brain in terms of subjects to cover in these videos or with Arise have been significant women in the Bible. And a part of me has been considering talking to the Lord about doing a series of some sort on significant women in the Bible. And it was amazing, because when I went to write it down, so I was just going through ideas with the Lord, and I thought, okay, let me just write down significant women in the Bible. And I wrote down significant women in the Bible. And who we think about when we think about significant women in the Bible, right? We think about the Deborahs, we think about the Esthers, we think about the Ruths, we think about the Marys, we think about the Elizabeths. Those are the people who spring to mind when you talk about significant women in the Bible. And I just felt God say to me, and those women are absolutely amazing. And I think I've said in one of my previous videos, we are calling for the Deborahs to arise. We're calling for the Esthers to arise. We're calling for the Ruths and the Marys and the Elizabeths, because we all need to step, as women, we need to step into our true identity as a part of this warrior bride. And we need those people to rise up. So those are women who are to be reckoned with, and those are callings and anointings and mantles that different women carry, of those different women in the Bible. Absolutely, I'm not in any way negating their influence or what they carried. But I felt God say to me, instead of calling it significant women in the Bible, I need to look at women of significance in the Bible. And I said to the Lord, it's the same thing. And he said, no, it isn't. A significant woman and women of significance, it's not the same thing. And you need to be, I felt him say to me that I needed to be looking more at the women of significance. Now, you might be saying to me, Sally, what has all of this got to do with consecration? I'm about to tell you. So God took me to Exodus, okay, way back in the day. Exodus chapter 1. Now, this is before the actual Exodus. So the Israelites have not left Egypt yet. They are still there. And it says here, the Egyptians had reduced the Israelites to severe slavery. So the Israelites had come into Egypt when Joseph was there. They had stayed, through the famine. They'd continued to stay. They had grown. They had produced children. They had gotten stronger and stronger and stronger. And the Egyptians could see that they were a threat, or the Egyptians felt threatened by them. Let's put it that way, rather. And in Exodus chapter 1, it says that a new king arose over Egypt who did not know Joseph. So Joseph and his brothers had all died. That whole generation of Israelites that had come into Egypt during the time of the famine had died. But the descendants of Israel were fruitful and increased abundantly. They multiplied and grew exceedingly strong, and the land was full of them. So the Israelites had really prospered. But a new king arose over Egypt who did not know Joseph. And he said to his people, behold, the Israelites are too many and too mighty for us, and they outnumber us both in people and in strength. Come, let us deal shrewdly with them, lest they multiply more, and should war befall us, they join our enemies, fight against us, and escape out of the land. So where the Israelites had lived there pretty much on their own terms, alongside the Egyptians, now a new king takes over, a new pharaoh, and he's now decided that no, they are too much of a threat. And what is the answer when a population or a group of people or a cultural group are too much of a threat? The first thing that is attempted is an attempt to subjugate them. So he says, so it says in Exodus 1, this is the Amplified Bible I'm reading from. So they set over the Israelites taskmasters to afflict and oppress them with increased burdens. And the Israelites built Pithom and Ramesses as store cities for Pharaoh. So they put them as slaves, basically. But the more the Egyptians oppressed them, the more they multiplied and expanded, so that the Egyptians were vexed and alarmed because of the Israelites. So that didn't stop them from multiplying and expanding, the fact that they were using them as slave labor, basically. So then it says, the Egyptians reduced the Israelites to severe slavery. They made their lives bitter with hard service in mortar, brick, and all kinds of work in the field. All their service was with harshness and severity. Now, I just want to stop there for a moment and just remind you that the Pharaoh, the king of Egypt, the Pharaoh who was over Egypt, in their minds, in the Egyptians' minds, Pharaoh was God. He was a God. The Pharaoh himself saw himself as a God. They didn't see themselves as mere mortals. They didn't see themselves as mere human beings. They set themselves up as God. In other words, if you set yourself up as a God, you are then setting yourself up in opposition to the one and only God. So when we read the stories of Exodus, when we read the stories of the plagues, when we read the stories of the Israelites leaving, you must bear in mind that all of that was done where our God, the one true God, Lord of Lords, King of Kings, was standing up and saying, I am the only God. You are not a God. And this is why I can prove it to you. Look at what I can do. It wasn't just a random series of events. It wasn't even just necessarily entirely. It was obviously the purpose was to set the Israelites free. But it took the length of time that it did, and God had to go to the lengths that he did in order to prove that he is the only God, not only to the Israelites, but to the Egyptians as well. So when you look at it from that perspective, here is this man, Pharaoh. He is a man, but he sees himself as a God. Pharaohs were worshipped by the Egyptians alongside, the other gods that they worshipped, and they saw themselves as a deity. So then the king of Egypt said to the Hebrew midwives, and here we have isn't this amazing? We have two Hebrew midwives who are actually named in the first chapter of Exodus, of whom one was named Shiphrah and the other Puah. Now, do you ever stop and think, what would be the relevance of naming these two Hebrew midwives? Out of everyone in the Bible, out of all the Israelites that are spoken about, these two Hebrew midwives are named in Exodus chapter 1. So you read on and it says, when you act as midwives to the Hebrew women and see them on the birth stool, if it is a son, you shall kill him, but if it is a daughter, she shall live. So what is Pharaoh trying to do? Wipe out the male babies. Weaken the Israelites by only allowing the girls to live and not allowing the boys to live. Basically, destroy a generation of Israelites, effectively. But the midwives feared God and did not do as the king of Egypt commanded, but let the male babies live. Now, just think about this for a second. Here are these Hebrew midwives. They are the women who go to the Hebrew women when the Hebrew women are in labor and deliver the babies. They are just ordinary women who assist the Hebrew women when they are giving birth. And they are Hebrew midwives. Not Egyptian midwives, they are Hebrew midwives. And here they have the king of Egypt. The king of Egypt, Pharaoh, this god who is worshipped by the Egyptians. This man who sets himself up as a deity over everybody, who has subjugated the Israelites into absolute severe slavery. And he comes and he gives them a specific instruction. And it's a horrific instruction. For most of us listening to it, we think, oh my goodness, that's awful, telling them to kill the male babies and only let the girls live. Terrible thing to do. As the babies are being born, they actually get to choose which ones live or die. It's horrendous. It's mind-blowing. It's terrible. And yet we sit today on the earth with very similar laws in place, where in a lot of places today, more than I would care to even think of, there's somebody who gets to decide whether a baby lives or dies. Now, we're not going to talk about that now, but we will talk about that one day. So the midwives feared God and did not do as the king of Egypt commanded, but let the male babies live. So despite the fact that the king of Egypt wasn't a very nice guy, he was used to people doing exactly what he told them to do. He was used to the Israelites particularly living in such abject fear and reduced to such hard conditions and severe slavery that they would have done what he told them to do without even thinking. But these two women feared God more than the king of Egypt. So when we talk about women of significance in the Bible, we talk about two women, one named Shiphrah and one named Puah, who feared God more than they feared Pharaoh. We talk about two women who basically prevented an attempt at genocide, an attempt to wipe out a generation of Israelite baby boys, because they feared God more than they feared Pharaoh. You see, you can say to me, Sally, what has that got to do with consecration? I'll tell you that I think that a large part of consecration is the fear of the Lord. That those fires that burn, the fire of purity, the fire of intimacy, the fire of holiness, those fires only burn in the all-consuming fire of God that is produced by the fear of the Lord. And I think that in our culture today, the fear of the Lord has got a bit of a bad rap. And we don't see a lot of that in churches anymore. We don't see a lot of the fear of the Lord in churches because fear is a bad thing. And when we say fear, and when we talk about a God who we are supposed to fear, we cannot reconcile a God who we are supposed to fear with a God of love and a God of grace and a God of mercy. But again, like I've said before in previous videos, we have to remember that we need to, if we love God, we have to love all aspects and facets of His personality. We have to know that there is a time when God stands as a God of love and grace and mercy, and there is a time when He stands up as a judge. But also, I think because we misinterpret the fear of the Lord, we misinterpret what the fear of the Lord actually means. And I've been looking up some verses regarding the fear of the Lord. For example, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. In other words, you cannot have wisdom or be wise if you're not starting with the fear of the Lord. Now, why would it say that in the Bible? Why would it say that? Well, I looked up the word that is translated fear from the Hebrew. Now, I have to right up front tell you that I don't know how to pronounce this word. So I'm going to say the word, and if I'm pronouncing it incorrectly, for all of you Hebrew scholars out there, forgive me. I haven't actually figured out how to pronounce it. But the word is spelled Y-I-R-A-H. To me, it looks like Yaira, but it could also be Yara, I'm not sure. Anyway, that is, when we translate fear into the English Bible, that is the Hebrew word that we translate fear from. And there is a sense where it does mean fear, fear of punishment, fear of judgment, an anticipatory fear of something going wrong. There is a sense of that. But as with so much in the Hebrew language, it comes with a range of meanings. And the range of meanings are these. Listen to this. It's sometimes fear, but it's also awe, reverence, wonder, amazement, mystery, gratitude, even worship. The fear of the Lord includes an overwhelming sense of the glory, worth, and beauty of the one true God. So, when you read that the midwives feared God more than they feared Pharaoh, I don't want you to misinterpret it as they were more scared of God than they were scared of Pharaoh, because that's not what it was at all. They looked with awe and reverence at the one true God, at the King of Kings, at the Lord of Lords, at the Creator of the universe, at the God who they knew as the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, at the God of Joseph who had led them into Egypt during those years of famine. That was the God that they were looking at when they said to Pharaoh, "No, we will not do what you asked us to do." Well, they didn't actually say that to Pharaoh exactly, because when Pharaoh said to them, "Why have you done this thing and allowed the male children to live?" they said, "The Hebrew women are not like the Egyptian women. They are vigorous and quickly delivered. Their babies are born before the midwife comes to them." So basically they just said, "Look, the babies are born far too quickly. We don't get there in time." But in their own spirits, in their own selves, they were saying no to Pharaoh, and they were saying yes to God. But they weren't doing that because they were more scared of God than they were scared of Pharaoh. They were doing that because they were scared of Pharaoh. He held the power of life and death. He could have wiped them out. He was a terrible man. The things that they did in those days were despicable to people who didn't follow, the rules or follow the things that were supposed to be done. But no, they feared God. But they didn't fear God in that they were scared of Him. They feared God. They feared God because they felt an overwhelming sense of the glory, worth, and beauty of the one true God. Because they felt reverential awe and wonder when they thought about God, the God of the universe. And so when we read those verses, when we read about these women of significance in the Bible, these women who took this decision and prevented widespread genocide within that context, they made a political decision. They made a choice to not go with the political voice of the day, but to walk where the fear of God took them. And that was something that came from being consecrated. That is something that comes out of purity, intimacy, holiness. That is something that comes from a place of having walked with the Lord and experienced Him. And you know, it says further on in verse 20, it says, "So God dealt well with the midwives, and the people multiplied and became very strong. And because the midwives revered and feared God, He made them households of their own." Because the midwives revered and feared God, He made them households of their own. They revered Him. That's what this is saying. They weren't scared of Him. When we look at women of significance in the Bible, we need to not always look at the well-known names and the well-known stories. We need to look at some of the nameless women that are referred to in the Bible who have made huge stands for God and done huge things for God. And you know what? That might be you. You might be somebody who you feel you're insignificant because you're not on a big platform, because you're not heard all around the world, because not everybody knows who you are. But everybody now knows the names of Shiphrah and Puah. And I promise you that when we step into eternity, the names that are going to be well known are names that we might never have heard on earth. They're going to be the names of in the natural, nameless, faceless people, the nameless, faceless women of God, who chose to walk in reverence and fear of the Lord and make decisions that have a huge impact in the natural and in the spiritual. That's what these two Hebrew midwives did. I think what's also amazing is the name Shiphrah means beautiful, and she must have been beautiful in the eyes of God with the stand that she took. And the name Puah means to cry out. It means to cry out. And I think that just sums this up. That in this space, in this place that we find ourselves in this world that has been shaken, everything we know that can be shaken is being shaken. We are here as women, as the beautiful half of the army, and God is calling us to cry out. There's some of us that God is calling to make a statement. There's some of us that God is calling to not bow to certain political pressure. There's some of us that God is calling to stand up and say something or do something that might not look like it has a huge impact now, but it will have a huge impact in the future, and it will have an impact in eternity. There's some of us who need to be using our voices to speak into being things that God is calling us to do so. And where does that come from? It comes from a space of existing within a place where you have consecrated yourself to God so that you can hear His voice so clearly, so that you know beyond a shadow of a doubt that this is what He is calling you to. So that you're not making a political statement for the fun of it, but you're doing it because you fear the Lord and you know that this is what He's calling you to do. Because you are going to walk in that place where you have such an awe and such a reverence for God that you cannot allow anybody else to tell you to do something that you know God is telling you to do the opposite. And there is a place in this space that we occupy right now where it is time for women to speak up. It is time for women to cry out. It is time for women's voices to be heard in many different spheres, in many different places, on many different levels. Some of them in intercession, some of them in prophecy, some of them on political platforms. We need to make sure that we're coming from a place of consecration, holiness, purity, intimacy with the Lord, and we need to make sure that we have that fear of the Lord, that awe and reverence for who He is. So I just decree and declare that over you today, because I'm running out of time. A reverential awe and fear of the Lord, that you will experience God in a new way when you open yourself up to that wonder of the Lord of Lords, King of Kings, Creator of the universe, that you will experience God like that within this next week. And we're going to carry this on next week. but be a woman whose voice is heard like Shiphrah and Pur. Bless you. See you next week.